Be honest. When's the last time you sat still with nothing to fix and nothing to improve, and it didn't feel uncomfortable? If that question made you squirm a little, this one's for you. We're talking about the growth trap, what it is, how it sneaks in, and how to tell if your self improvement has quietly become your hiding place. So, what the growth trap is. All right, let's start off with a definition because I think this idea gets misunderstood a lot. The growth trap isn't about having goals. It isn't about wanting to get healthier, smarter, more disciplined, or more emotionally aware. Those things are good. The growth trap is what happens when the pursuit of better stops being something that you choose and it starts being something that you can't stop. When self improvement shifts from being a tool that you use to being a treadmill that you can't get off. It's growth that's no longer about where you're going. It's growth that's really about what you're trying not to feel. So I know for my life, been a lot of times when I've always wanted to, constantly improve and feel like I was getting better, building my skills, building my resume, whatever it is, in whatever aspect of my life. And generally that starts off as something really positive. But what ends up happening is something really subtle and a little bit more sinister. Over time, we start to forget what it is that we actually set out to do in the first place. And we start doing that optimization. We start doing that continual push for the sake of doing it without stepping back to say, does this still fit my needs? Does this still align with my life? And I think when we do that, and it's less about curiosity and more about restlessness, like we feel as though we're not growing if we're not constantly moving and in motion. The problem with that is on the outside, it looks really good. It looks like someone who's motivated and you're constantly pushing to get better, and all those things look really positive. But internally, you never get a chance to shift the engines back into neutral and feel as though you can just be, you can exist, you can feel happy. I know for me, one of the biggest things where I noticed this is when I would take a vacation. I worked so hard, continually pushing toward whatever goals that I've set. And I would go on vacation and take my stuff with me, my laptop, whatever else. But as soon as I started to get into the flow of the vacation, I found myself working less and less. And at first, it was really challenging to do that. The first day, 2 days. By the time I got a few days into vacation, I was actually really enjoying myself and trying honestly to think less about work. And I didn't care that much about it. I didn't care that much about all those improvement goals. And so I challenge you to think about the same thing. Are you in situations where you're constantly pushing, but when you actually get a chance to step back long enough to unplug, does that feel good? Because if it does, chances are you might be in the same trap that I was. So that can look like a really healthy place to be because on the outside, you're building and growing towards something, and that's going to be impressive to other people. But for you internally, you're struggling because you're not feeling whole. You're feeling like you constantly need to move or you're falling behind. Now, here's why self improvement is not the problem. I want to be really clear about something before we go any further because I don't want this episode to be misread. Self improvement is not the problem. Discipline is not the problem. Wanting more for your life, more health, more clarity, more skill, more depth, none of that is the problem. Growth is one of the most natural human things there is. It's how we heal. It's how we mature. It's how we become people who can hold more responsibility, more love, more truth about ourselves and the world. So if you hear me describe some of these patterns today and think, wait a minute, that sounds like me. This isn't an indictment. It's an invitation to look a little closer at why you're doing what you're doing. So, healthy growth is you set out an example because you want to learn something. Okay, I want to learn to become a public speaker. So I start practicing in front of the camera and then I set up and I go out and learn what the best speakers do, what traits they have, how they study to improve their craft. Then I set up a couple of speaking engagements and I go to my local chamber of commerce or something small to get a couple of those things under my belt. That's really positive growth. I want to get more lean and have a more healthy body. So I go to the gym and I work out and I do it a couple of days a week for a couple of hours. I'm feeling good about myself, but neither of those things maniacally call to me. They're not sitting on my shoulder saying to me every time I'm not moving forward, "You're falling behind, you're falling behind." That is the difference between positive growth and growth that can be unhealthy because we're doing it for a different reason and a compulsion. So when you're training for something you love and you're learning a skill that lights you up, go for it. That's what you should do. But at the same time, when you start doing the other things or you start feeling as though you can't stop doing it, that's when it becomes a problem because you should be happy about the growth you're getting no matter what, even if you still have more growth to attain and reach. So, this is how growth can become avoidance. And it's where it gets interesting. Growth and avoidance can look almost identical from the outside, sometimes even from the inside. Two people can have the exact same morning routine, the exact same workout schedule, the exact same reading list. For one of them, it's fuel. For the other, it's flight. The difference isn't the activity, it's the relationship to the stillness. Avoidance driven growth tends to show up when there's a feeling underneath that someone doesn't want to be alone with: grief, loneliness, fear of not being enough, boredom, maybe uncertainty about who they are outside of what they produce. And instead of sitting with that feeling, even for a few minutes, the response is optimize it away, build a system around it, add another goal, fill the space before the feeling has a chance to surface. Those aren't healthy because ultimately we need to experience that range of emotions. We need to feel like we can be still sometimes. We need to feel like maybe there's still more growth to do at sometimes. And we don't always need to be moving forward. So if somebody went through a breakup and then suddenly overhauled their whole life, maybe you know somebody like that. Maybe it's been something that's happened to you or someone close to who you are. And that can be really healthy processing if it's done the right way, or it can be a way of skipping the grief if it's about continually moving. So it all depends on what's underneath it and what drives it. Think of another scenario, maybe a person who can't relax on vacation, like I alluded to, right? Without a project. That used to be me. Then I got to a point where I still bring it with me. I'm not, cool enough to be cold turkey and say, I'm leaving the laptop at home. I bring it with me. But what I find is, as I start to dive more into the vacation and start to enjoy it, I start to think about work less. I do less work, and it's not on my mind. It doesn't call to me in the same way. So I want to invite you to think of a time that you leveled up right after something painful. And then think about whether or not that was processing or postponing. Were you trying to get better and reconcile what you were dealing with, or were you just running from the truth? Because the difference between becoming and escaping is really important. And I want to get specific here because this is the heart of the episode. Becoming is moving towards something, escaping is moving away from something. Becoming says, I want to grow because I'm curious about who I could be. Escaping says, I need to grow because I can't stand who I am right now. Becoming can hold ambition and acceptance at the same time. I love who I am and I'm still growing. Escaping can't hold both. In escaping, growth becomes conditional. You don't get to feel okay until you've achieved the next thing. And once you get there, guess what? The goalposts move again because the goal was never really the goal. The goal was relief. Here's the tricky part. The actions can look exactly the same. Same workout, same business plan, same therapy appointment. What's different is the engine underneath. Is it expansion or is it escape? So, if we think about this like an analogy of running toward a finish line that you actually want to cross versus running because something's chasing you, it's the same motion, but a completely different experience. So, for me, what I try to look at is stop in those quiet moments and think about what it is that you're working toward. Ask yourself, does this still align with what you want and what you care about? And most importantly, how would it feel if I just took a week off? For me, this physical working out used to be this way. I'm a weightlifter. I've been a weightlifter since I was, 15, 16 years old, and I love it. And when I was younger, I was maniacal about it to the point that if I was ever sick, if I was ever tired, if I ever had anything that got in the way, it frustrated me because I was losing ground. I couldn't gain all the ground I wanted to gain. As I got older and my life got busier, I had less time to do it. And I'd love to take credit for it, but the reality of it is it was just my circumstance because I was no longer able to work out as often as I wanted. And I didn't have the emotional energy reserves and physical energy reserves to work out as hard as I wanted. I naturally shifted my goals. And the interesting thing is, I started to become comfortable with an uneven schedule. My plan was always the same. I'm going to work out, 4 or 5 days this week, but then there would be things that got in the way, and I would just push that day's workout to the next day. And the more I started to do that, the less bad I felt about it. And I started to just accept the fact that I'm still moving forward. Yes, it might not always be at the same pace, but that's okay. Other stuff can take priority sometimes. That's how I recognized it was healthy. And I got a much healthier relationship with fitness and working out. And I challenge you to do the same thing. Step back and look at that and think to yourself, how does that feel? Lean into the uncomfortableness of not always optimizing or pushing and see if it starts to adjust and you start to feel better about it. So you can both be happy that you're growing, but also not maniacally pushed to continue to go further, faster all the time. So here are some signs that self improvement has become another way to run. How can you actually tell? Well, the signs worth paying attention to, this isn't a diagnosis, it's just like a mirror, right? One, you feel anxious or restless when you don't have a goal to chase. Stillness feels like falling behind. Two, your sense of self-worth rises and falls with your productivity, your habits, your progress. A good day is defined entirely by output. Three, you're constantly consuming more books, more podcasts, more frameworks, more advice, but rarely pausing to actually live what you've already learned. Four, rest feels like something that you have to earn, justify, or recover from guilt about. Five, when something painful happens, your first move is always to fix it, optimize it, or turn it into a project before you've let yourself feel it. And six, deep down, there's a quiet sense that you'll finally be okay once you get there, once you hit the goal, the body, the income, the routine, but there keeps moving. So pick one or two of those signs, think about them for yourself, and try to go deeper with them like I did with my own workout. And what I recognized is once I leaned into it a little bit and stopped running from it, I became more comfortable with it being messy, with it not always being on a perfect schedule, with it not always being the best workout. Sometimes even in a workout, I'll do 80 or 90% of it instead of the full 100% and call it a day. And that griminess is actually really awesome when you can live with that and actually be okay with it, not obsess about it for the rest of the day. So mentally check off anything that resonates without judgment. And this isn't a quiz, but I want you to think about it for yourself for how you can help this improve your life. Because the emotional cost of constantly trying to fix yourself is real and it's not nothing. When growth becomes a form of avoidance, your relationship with yourself slowly becomes adversarial. You start relating to yourself the way a manager relates to an underperforming employee. You're always evaluating, always finding the gap, always pointing at what's next. Over time, that's exhausting in a very specific way. It's not the tiredness of hard work, it's the tiredness of never being allowed to just be a person, of never getting a clock out from the project of yourself. There's also a quieter cost. When you're always trying to fix or improve yourself, you can start to believe on some level that you are the problem, not your habits, not your circumstances, you. And that belief can sit underneath all the achievement, totally untouched by it, because no amount of external progress can resolve an internal belief that you're fundamentally not okay as you are. So, burnout from self improvement actually feels like a fatigue that never goes away. I've been there, I understand it. You get to a place where you're emotionally drained and you're physically drained. You slept a reasonable amount last night, yet you wake up feeling tired. You get snappy at things that shouldn't really bother you because you have a short fuse, because emotionally you're just fraught. And little things seem to pile on and make bigger deals out of themselves just because you don't have the reserves to deal with it. That pattern never seems to reset. That's a sign that that's the place that you're at. And so that pattern can really affect your relationships. It can affect being present with people And it can affect your patience with people as well, and your ability to relate to them and have positive, productive relationships. So, why presence, acceptance, and integration matter. So, what's the alternative? Because I'm not saying stop growing. I'm saying growth needs three things alongside it to actually work: presence, acceptance, and integration. Presence means being able to be where you are, including in discomfort, which took me a long time to learn, including in stillness, without immediately needing to change it, fix it, or turn it into a lesson. Acceptance means that you can be fully okay with who you are right now and still want to grow. These aren't opposites. Real growth is so much more sustainable when it's not fueled by self rejection. You could plant a garden because you love the land, not because you hate how it looks right now. And integration is maybe the most overlooked piece. Integration means actually living what you've learned, letting an insight change how you show up instead of just collecting it and moving on to the next book, the next program, the next version of yourself. A lot of people are incredibly good at learning and incredibly bad at integrating. They know the principle, they've heard the talk, they've read the book twice, but it hasn't actually become part of how they live yet because they were already reaching for the next thing before the last thing had time to settle. So, if we think about this as another analogy, it's growth without integration is like eating without digesting. You could keep adding more, but nothing's actually nourishing you. So, I've met a lot of people across various walks of my life, and I'm guilty of this myself. So, I'm going to ask you a question. Have you ever known something for years and then you hear it again, and then you actually change your behavior because you knew it, but you just never did anything about it? Because that's exactly what this is all about. I've been there. I know a lot of people who have been there. And when you finally make that change, what made the difference? It's when you shift your relationship between just trying to gain more knowledge and actually start to implement things, then that's where there's a shift and there's a difference. Okay, so before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a few questions. You don't have to answer them right now. Just let them sit with you for the next day or two. If I stopped improving anything for 1 week, no new habits, no goals, no fixing, what would I feel? What would come up? When I look at my current goals, am I moving towards something I want or away from something I'm afraid of? What would it feel like to believe I'm already enough and still want to grow? Is there a feeling I've been productive enough to avoid for a long time? And where in my life have I learned something true but haven't actually let it change how I live yet? Pick the question that feels most relevant to you right now. You don't have to focus on all of them. And briefly share where that all lands. Think about that for real. And we want honest reflection here, not a tidy answer. So, again, hedge against being that optimized version of yourself or always needing to push. And here's what I want to invite you to do this week: pick one day, just one, and build in 15 minutes where you do absolutely nothing productive. No podcast, no book, no journaling prompt, no plan. Just sit. Walk without your phone, stare out a window. And when the discomfort shows up, because for a lot of us it will, don't fix it. Don't turn it into a project. Just notice it. That's it. That's the whole practice. Because if growth is going to be sustainable, if it's going to actually expand your life instead of just keeping you busy inside it, it has to be able to coexist with moments where you're doing nothing at all and you're still okay. That's not the opposite of growth. That might be one of the most important parts of it. Come back and share it. I'd love to hear from you. You can post it as a comment on any of our socials, and would love to know what sort of insight you were able to get from that. Because that is the key to being able to live well, is starting with that recognition and awareness so we can make conscious decisions and live our life intentionally.